Hey everybody, welcome to a tutorial brought to you by aetutsplus.com. My name is Anthony Arasuris and I'm going to show you how I created this interface design. I'm going to play through it a couple of times so you get an idea of exactly what we're going to recreate today. Okay, so this is the idea. It's a digital interface, screen reveal. It can be used for a computer screen or any other type of interface that you're going for. I created most of it in Illustrator, so I'm going to switch to Illustrator so I'll have a little more flexibility with my design and layout. So open Illustrator and create a new document by hitting Command N, and we'll set our dimensions to 1920 by 1080 so it is full HD, RGB. Hit OK, and I'm going to hit M for the rectangle tool, and we'll drag out some of these shapes so we create the design that I've already done in the previous design there. And once you drag out a few of these shapes, it gets a little easier. You'll see the composition change, and you just get creative with it depending on whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. Whether it be for a computer screen, TV, whatever the design is, this futuristic interface look is for you. So we'll create some of these shapes here by creating some of these strokes, and we'll create this shape here where we'll overlay some text and we'll change it to a fill. I'm going to hit V for the arrow tool and hold down Option, then hit Shift and drag down, then hit Command D to duplicate, and we'll offset these a bit so that it creates a little irregularity so they don't look the same. Now we'll also create a few other shapes here, and we'll set this to 4-point stroke and duplicate this by holding down Option and drag that down, and we'll create a few other shapes and duplicate some of these. It makes it a little easier as you drag a few out and hit Command D, hold down Command D, and it will continue to create this duplicating effect and makes it a lot easier. And we'll duplicate this part here, move it in a different place, and you can see we've already created quite a few shapes in just a few minutes just by duplicating and creating some of these easy strokes and simple shapes. I'm going to hit L for the ellipse tool, create a circle here, and hit M again for the rectangle tool, Shift X to switch to a fill, and Option Shift drag down and duplicate that. And we'll grab this entire set and duplicate it over here as well. Now switch back to the rounded rectangle tool and create some buttons here on the right side. And we'll also change the color later, but we'll go ahead and duplicate these down. Command D or Control D if you're on a PC. And we'll toggle these buttons on and off when we do some animation in After Effects. But you get the idea what I'm going for, so I want to skip a little further ahead into the tutorial and get further into the animation. But you can see how this only takes a few minutes just to create this interface design, and you can get as creative as you want with it. But let's get back to After Effects. And this is a final complete version that I created. I've already imported all of my graphics into After Effects with clearly labeled layers. And I did add quite a few things extra so that this design looks a bit techy and customize it a bit. So let's select this layer here, and I'm going to hit P for position, and let's set a keyframe here at the beginning of the timeline. And a lot of these animations, we're going to create some looping animations by creating some simple expressions, and move down to about 30 frames. Hold down Shift, page down 3 times. That'll put us into about 1 second. And we'll hold Shift and drag this shape out a bit. That will automatically create another keyframe. And we'll move down another 30 frames to about 2 seconds. And we'll copy this first keyframe and paste it here. And this will create an animation going back and forth. So for the next step, let's hit Shift T for opacity, and that'll bring up the properties for that, and we'll move to the beginning of the timeline, and we'll set a keyframe here. Hit K to go to the very next keyframe, and let's take the opacity down to about 30%, and hit K again, and we'll change that to 100%. Now we'll go ahead and create an expression for both of these. That way the animation continues to loop throughout the duration of the animation here. This way we don't have to keyframe every animation that we do here throughout the project. And we'll copy all of this and hold down Option and click on the opacity stopwatch, or Alt if you're on PC, and we'll paste the expression here. And we'll select all these keyframes, hit F9, give it an easy ease. And as we RAM preview this, you can see how the ease creates a smoother animation. So we'll select this layer and hit U to hide all the keyframes. If you hit U, it'll show you all your keyframes. If you hit U again, it will hide them. So this layer here, I want to do a little flashing opacity animation on this, so we'll hit T for opacity, and we'll bring this back to the very beginning and set a keyframe here and move out approximately 10 frames by holding down Shift page down, and we'll change the opacity to 30% and go another 10 frames out and bring it back up to 100. And since we'll do a loop on this one as well, we'll go down another 10 frames and create another keyframe. This way it'll hold for 10 frames before looping again. Hold down Option, hit the stopwatch, and we'll paste the animation into here as well, or the expression that is. So let's hide the animation keyframes here, and we'll select the next layer. And I want to do an animation on these buttons here so that they flash as well. So we'll do some opacity adjustments here, and we could just copy these exact same keyframes here and select these and copy them, and select this layer and paste, and hit U so we see all of the keyframes, and it also keeps the expression on there as well. So you can see how it flashes on and off. So let's go to the next layer, and we'll change this opacity as well, and we'll add the same expression on this, but we'll change the animation a bit. But we'll paste the exact same animation here, and we're just offsetting it a bit, that way the animation isn't exactly the same. So we'll move this keyframe to the beginning so it animates in a little slower than the previous layer. So if we take a look at what we've done so far, you can see how the animation is offset a bit between the layers. They animate at different times here. You can do other animations here, but you don't want it to be flashing too much. But you can see how it's offset a bit and how they all flash on different intervals. So let's select all of our layers and hit Command A, hit U once more, just so we can see exactly our layers that we have here. So I'm going to give myself a little more room so I can see what I've got going on here. And I'm going to select this layer here, and I'm going to go to the beginning of the keyframe, to the timeline, set a keyframe on the opacity by hitting T, and we'll go down 30 frames, and we'll move it down to about 30% and go out another 30 frames, and we'll bring it back to 100. Hold down Alt or Option and click, and we'll paste our expression here again. So we're just using the same expression throughout these different keyframes. So let's create a mask here on this layer, and we'll drag around the entire layer to create this mask here, and hit J to go to the previous keyframe, and set a keyframe for the mask. We're twirling it down under mask path. Then we'll move back to the beginning of the timeline and select the mask by double clicking and drag it back to the beginning here. This way it animates in from nothing, and we'll hit K to go to the next keyframe, hit K once more, and we'll create one more keyframe, so it will hold here for a second after it animates in. Then move down about 15 frames and we'll double click on the mask and drag it up. So you can get a little creative with this mask of how it animates in and out, just to keep it interesting. So move out a few more frames and we'll move the mask back to the beginning. So let's move down about 10 frames, 20 frames. I'll say 15. And we'll create another keyframe so it holds here. And we'll move down to about 4 seconds and drag this mask out to reveal the underlying layer once more. And move out about another 15 frames or 20 and hold here once again by creating another keyframe, and out another 10 frames, and this time we'll bring the animation down, the mask, and since the animation is only a few seconds long, we won't need to continue animating this very far out. So you can see how the animation begins to look pretty cool. And let's move on to another layer. And we'll do the same thing here with creating masks, but we'll make the animation slightly different so it's not the exact same animation from the previous layer. So we'll start back to the beginning and we'll hit I. That'll take you to the beginning of that layer where it starts. Takes you to the end point. And we'll create another mask around this layer. And let's start this out at the beginning before it comes on. We'll animate this shape on. And set a keyframe here, twirl down, hit mask path. And for this one we'll go out 1 second, which is 30 frames. And we'll double click on the mask and drag it out to reveal the entire shape here. And move down about another 30 frames and we'll bring this side so that it follows along as it animates in. And we will go down about 1 second. We'll keep 1 second in between each of these animations, in between each of the keyframes, and we'll double click the mask and drag it out to about here. And we'll go out another 30 frames and bring the animation back to the beginning, or the end actually. And we'll move out again and we'll open our mask up and we'll bring it down to about here and go down about another 20 frames and we'll bring it back to this side again. So this bar sort of grows and moves as if it's creating some kind of data or it's loading or something, so it's kind of like a progress bar or something. So it's looking pretty cool. Let's continue on and move to another layer. Now for this next part here, I have some text layered here and I want to create this bar so that it animates in and out to cover up the text so that you cannot read it or it kind of reveals, it's being revealed. So we'll create another mask, drag around the shape, hit I to go to the beginning of the layer, the end point, And we'll set a keyframe here on this mask, and we'll move down about 15 frames. Select the mask, and we'll move the entire mask off so that it reveals the text underneath. And we'll hold here for about 15 frames, so we move out and then create another keyframe. And another 15 frames out, and we will drag this mask all the way across so it scrubs through the text underneath. And we'll hold here for about 10 frames, set a keyframe. And the timing can be changed on this however you feel. It's totally up to you, but you know, it's something that is variable. So this time we'll leave the animation off so we can leave the text underlying, visible. And you can see how everything moves so far throughout the animation we've done. Let's go ahead and duplicate this layer, select it, and we want to apply the same effect down below here. So we'll duplicate the layer by selecting it, hit Command D, and let's move to a point where we can see the full reveal. And let's move this layer down a bit so that it covers the text underneath. And we can stretch it out a bit so that it covers the entire layer. This way the text is hidden underneath. And hit U so we can see all of the keyframes. And we'll offset it a bit so that it doesn't move exactly the same as the previous animation. So select these keyframes and hold down Shift and drag out. This way it snaps to the playhead here. And scrub through it. We can see how the timing is off a bit. It moves at different times than the previous layer. Let's do the same thing again. Let's select this layer and duplicate it. Command D or Control D. And if you hold Shift also while you're dragging, it'll snap to each keyframe that you're scrubbing between. Or you can use J to go to the previous keyframe, K to go to the very next keyframe. Go to the beginning and we'll drag this layer down by holding Shift. And we'll also want to offset the animation on this layer as well. But since we're not creating the exact same animation, keyframing it, we'll just duplicate it and use the same keyframes that we've used. So let's go down to about 10 frames and select a few of these keyframes and move it over. This way this animation will come in a lot faster. And this part here is the same, so we'll offset these keyframes here a bit as well. And they all do move at different times. So these are all the layers that I wanted to create an animation for, but some of these layers we can duplicate them and continue to add them in different places. So let's take this layer and hit Command D to duplicate it, hit W for the rotate tool, and we'll rotate this out a bit. And we'll move this layer to about here. So we can place these elements in different areas. Let's move it over a little bit so it doesn't overlap and interfere with the text underneath. So you can see how it all kind of plays out now. And just by using the exact same animation or same shape, you can add these objects in different areas. It makes it a little easier so you can kind of create stuff and not have to do more work than what you need to. So let's duplicate this layer again, hit Command D and hold down Shift and drag, and we'll place this here. Let's move it up a little bit more as well. Now the animation on these are exactly the same, so we'll want to offset it just like we have done in the previous layers. Select these keyframes and hold down Option and click and drag, and this stretches the keyframes out over time altogether. Now we can place these keyframes or these objects in different areas, but let's try a different layer. We'll select this one, duplicate it, select all of the keyframes and drag it out to about here so that it matches up perfectly with the logo. And that animates in, but it also animates at the exact same time as the other layer. So we'll do the same thing that we've been doing and drag these keyframes out to about 2 seconds. And now the timing is off a little more between the other layers. So I'm happy with the animation that I've done so far. So let's go ahead and create a new composition. Command N or Control N. And the duration will be about 5 seconds. Hit OK. And we'll drag this layer here, this composition. Now, I have several different versions. I was playing with a bit of these before doing this tutorial, but we'll drag this one here into our new composition we just created, and that is all the animation that we created from the previous comp. So we'll select this layer and hit scale. We'll hit S for scale. And we'll uncheck this here so that it doesn't link the so it doesn't move in exact scale with each other. So it doesn't move in correct proportions to it. So we'll scale it down to pretty close to about 0. So this way it starts at hardly anything, and we'll set a keyframe and we'll go down to about 5 frames, and we'll change this to scale out, and we'll bring this up a bit so that this is slightly like a TV screen turning on, or an old monitor or something like that. So we'll go out 1 frame and we'll bring this back in, and this time we'll drag it up vertically, and we'll go down 1 more frame, and this time we'll make it a little more proportionate so you can kind of see what it is what's about to be turned on this monitor. So let's move down about 2 frames, and this time we'll stretch it out horizontally. And with this also, we'll move this down a bit, but you can experiment on this sort of animation to whatever it is that you like, but you can kind of get this feel, this effect of a monitor being turned on. So it kind of fluctuates, and it has room for experimenting. So let's move down a couple more keyframes, and we're getting closer to revealing the actual full reveal here. So it's getting closer to the exact dimensions. And we'll move down about 3 more frames, and we'll shrink this down a bit and scale this down a bit as well. And down about another 2 frames, and this time let's actually pull it to its full scale that we want to leave it on. So we'll hit 160 on both, and this is exactly where we want to have this animation start on. And we'll want to hold here for a few frames, so let's move down to about 10 frames. And we'll scale it back a bit. We'll check this here so that it moves in the correct proportion. And scale it down to about 90%. This will create a really quick pop so that it's zooming in and out really quickly. And we'll move down about 3 frames and move it up to 100%. And this will create that really quick movement. And we'll move down a few more frames and we'll create another keyframe so it holds and pauses at this part of the animation. And we'll move down a frame and we'll scale this all the way up to about 245 or so. And we'll keep it here and scale it right back down a bit after moving out another frame. This just creates a really fast, quick animation, unexpected kind of flicker. So we'll do a preview so you can see how this is beginning to look as it animates in. It's pretty close to what we want. And we'll add some ease to some of these keyframes and also some motion blur so that everything isn't exactly sharp as it animates in. So we'll move down to about 3 seconds. And we'll set another keyframe here. So this will hold this entire time at this position. Then we'll move down about 3 frames. And we'll scale it up just a bit. We're going to zoom out, but first we want to do this. So it's going to zoom in and then pull out really quick. And we'll go down about another 5 frames. And we'll take this animation and really crank it up, zoom it in quite a bit. So actually we should have done this in reverse. Let's select this keyframe, copy it, and paste it here. And instead of zooming in, we'll zoom out instead. So this way it bounces, goes back, and then in. So sorry for the little confusion. And when we get to this point, we'll change the opacity and so that it transitions out. We'll move to this keyframe, hold down Shift and hit T. That'll bring up opacity. And we'll set a keyframe, then move down, and we'll change this to 0. And we'll start at 0 opacity at the beginning as well. And go out about 10 frames, and this is where the animation will come in. So it starts out at black and ends at black as well. So this is a RAM preview. You can see how everything looks together, animates in and out at full speed. What I'd like to do is add a little motion blur, and we'll toggle this here, and you got to click here as well so that it sets the motion blur on the layer, and it also turns the motion blur on. So let's create a new adjustment layer, new adjustment layer, and select it, and we'll add an effect by right clicking and then set effect, trap code, star glow. And you can probably get a similar effect just by adding a glow if you don't have the trap code plugins, but the star glow gives you a lot more creative control over your artwork that you have. So we'll toggle down pre-process and change the threshold to We'll scroll through it, change it to about 90. And then the streak length, we will take it to 1. And that tones it down quite a bit and makes it seem a little more real than just with the automatic settings that are already in there. We'll change the softness and we'll boost the light as well. You can see before and after here. And you don't want to do it too much, but just a little hint, and so that it's noticeable. And we'll change the transfer mode to overlay. And that's the star glow here that we've added to it. So let's create a new solid by hitting Command Y. And we'll change the color to black, hit OK. And select the mask here. And if you double click on this, the mask tool, it'll create a mask on the full layer. And we'll change this to subtract, hit F for feather. And we'll feather the mask a bit. Let's type in about 200. And we'll bring down all the properties for the mask. And we'll change the expansion. That way it'll bring it in quite a bit, and we'll bring it to about -100. This feathers the edges of the screen, so it creates it black, so it's almost kind of like a warping effect to it. Just so it makes it a little softer. So we've done that. Now I also want to do the logo and give it the treatment of like a noisy, static, old television effect. So I have some footage here of TV noise, and we'll bring this in. This is something that I got from Video Copilot that you can find either there or probably from your own TV source, or if you capture any footage or anything. So let's duplicate this layer, and we'll change the opacity on the bottom layer to 20%. And we'll give it a Luma matte on this layer so that the noise is coming through the AE Tuts logo. So we'll select both of these layers and create a new composition out of them by hitting Command-Shift-C. And we'll change this layer name and move all attributes into the new composition, hit OK. And we'll change the mode of this to screen or add, and we'll duplicate it by hitting Command D, and now you can see it coming through a little brighter. And we'll move to our other composition, and you can see the effect that has been created with the noise being added to the logo and also the star glow that has been applied. Now for the final step, we'll bring in the sound design that has been created. And I want to add one final effect to the layer. Right click, go to Effect, Distort, and go to Warp. And we'll change the warp style to fisheye. And take the bend down so that it's not so extreme. $15 looks pretty good. So let's do a final render, RAM preview, and see how this looks. So that's the final output of this tutorial, and I'd like to say thank you for watching. I'm glad I could share a few tricks and simple techniques that you can use in After Effects with basic principles. Take a look at my website, and if there's anything on there that you might want to see, you can request a tutorial, leave me a comment, and maybe I can do one for you. But thanks again for watching, and hopefully I showed you something new that you can use for a future project. This has been a tutorial for aetutsplus.com. Thanks for watching.